Let me tell you something about the word difficult. It's one of those adjectives people toss around when they don't want to admit they're just uncomfortable with your existence. That was me. Wendy, the difficult daughter. I wasn't rebellious in the way movies portray. I didn't get arrested. I didn't run off with a biker gang or tattoo my face. No. My crime was worse. I spoke my mind. I saw through people. Especially my parents. Growing up, I was the kid who asked why a little too much. Why does Dad disappear on Christmas Eve? Why does Mom say she's on a diet and hide Twinkies in her closet? These questions didn't make me a philosopher, just problematic. And my siblings? Ah, yes, the golden children. Jessica and Brian, blonde, smiling mannequins. They nodded and smiled and said thank you even when our parents were serving them a moldy version of love. They played the game. I refused. The last straw, apparently, came during my mother's 65th birthday. We were gathered at their McMansion, with its gaudy granite countertops and furniture wrapped in plastic like a mausoleum of comfort. My mother stood at the head of the table, glass of wine in hand, beaming like she just won a Nobel Peace Prize. She made a little speech, thanked everyone for coming, praised Jessica for her 3 children, gushed over Brian's new condo, then paused, smiled directly at me and said, "And Wendy, well, we all know she's special." Cue the awkward laughter. Forks clinked. I raised my glass and said, "Special like a fire drill in a nursing home." Silence. Pure gold. 3 weeks later, my father called, not to apologize, of course. No, that would require basic decency. "Your mother and I have decided to update our will," he said. I leaned back in my chair. "Oh? Finally leaving me the porcelain cat collection? You're not in it anymore. Just like that." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Wow. You're cutting me out of the will because I made a joke? That's low, even for you." He sighed. "It's not just the joke, Wendy. You've always been difficult. You never fit in with the family. We're doing what's best for everyone." Click. That was the last conversation I ever had with my father. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even tell anyone. I just sat there for a few minutes, stunned, then poured myself a glass of wine and watched reruns of Judge Judy. I didn't need their money. I had a decent job. I lived modestly but comfortably. What stung wasn't the inheritance. It was the confirmation that, in their eyes, I had always been the spare part. The flaw in their otherwise picture-perfect family portrait. 2 years passed. They didn't invite me to family holidays. They didn't return my calls. Eventually, I stopped trying. I figured, let them have their fantasy life. I was done being the villain in their fairy tale. Then one Tuesday morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. "Hi, this is Diane from Allen & Merrick Realty. We're reaching out to notify local residents that a property at 234 Maple Drive will be going up for public auction due to estate complications. If you'd like to attend the auction or request more info," I froze. 34 Maple Drive. That was my parents' address. I called back immediately. Turns out dear old Dad had passed away 8 months earlier. Mom followed 3 months after. Natural causes, quiet funerals. And because my name wasn't in the will, no one thought to tell me. Apparently there'd been some legal mess. Brian had taken out a second mortgage. Jessica couldn't keep up the taxes. And now, the house, their temple of judgment and passive aggression, was up for auction. I should have felt sad, maybe even devastated. But all I felt was a strange, electric calm. I booked a flight for the following week. The auction was held in a musty courthouse that smelled like dust and broken promises. I walked in wearing sunglasses and a black blazer, hair in a tight bun. I looked like someone's divorce attorney. No one recognized me. Jessica was there, sitting beside a man I assumed was her husband. Brian stood at the back, pacing, looking sweaty and panicked. They had no idea I was in the room. I took a seat at the front. The auctioneer began. The house started at $70,000. A few paddles went up, some investors maybe. Jessica raised hers. Brian shouted his bid from the back. It climbed steadily. 80, 90, 95, 100,000. That's when I raised my hand. Jessica turned around. Her mouth fell open. Brian squinted. Then his eyes widened. "Wendy?" Jessica gasped. I didn't respond. 110, I called. They tried to outbid me. They really did. But I had something they didn't. Cash. Years of saving. Years of being prudent. Years of not blowing money on plastic surgery and lakefront vacations. 135,000. Going once. Going twice. Sold. Bang, and. Just like that, I owned the house I was never good enough to inherit. The looks on their faces, worth every penny. Outside, Jessica caught up to me. "You can't do this," she hissed. "Actually, I can. Legally, morally, spiritually. It's our family home." "No, it was. Now it's mine. You did this on purpose." I took off my sunglasses and smiled. "What gave it away?" She stormed off. I stood there looking at the house key in my hand. They'd called me difficult. But I wasn't difficult. I was just done playing nice. The house was exactly how I remembered it. Impeccable. Cold. Lifeless. Every vase in the same place. Every throw pillow fluffed to unnatural proportions. The living room smelled faintly of lavender and repressed emotions. Even the fake fireplace logs sat untouched, like stage props for a family that only pretended to be warm. I walked through the hallway slowly, the sound of my heels echoing like a countdown. There were still photos of me on the walls, just not recent ones. Apparently my teenage self was easier to tolerate than the adult version. I stopped in front of one from my high school graduation. I was smiling, cap tilted slightly, my eyes sharp. My mother stood beside me, hand on my shoulder like she was claiming a trophy. I looked, resistant, even back then. They kept that photo. They could erase me from the will, but not from the walls. I unlocked the master bedroom first. Gone. Completely empty. Whoever handled the estate must have cleared it out. Or maybe Jessica and Brian scavenged it already, like vultures in pearls and boat shoes. No matter. I wasn't here for the furniture. I was here for the funeral I never got to attend. The closure no one bothered to give me, and the revenge I wasn't supposed to have. I hired a crew to deep clean the place, not because it needed it, but because it felt symbolic, like I was scrubbing off years of judgment and condescension. They power washed the driveway, steam cleaned the carpets, even aired out the attic where my mother kept her hoard of seasonal decorations. 10 bins of ceramic Santas and glitter pumpkins. I threw them all out. Therapeutic. By the 3rd week, I started making changes. The guest room, formerly Jessica's private princess suite, became a study. I painted the walls deep green and filled it with books, real ones. Not the decorative spines my mother used to buy by the foot. Brian's old room, home gym, complete with a punching bag. His yearbook photo, still taped to the closet door, now had a post-it note on it that said, "Target practice. Childish? Maybe. But satisfying? Deeply." Then came the real project. The kitchen. My mother's domain. She spent more time polishing those granite counters than actually cooking on them. I ripped them out entirely, replaced them with butcher block, and matte black cabinets. It went from suburban Stepford to cozy modern. She would have hated it, and that was the point. Word started to spread in the neighborhood. One afternoon, as I was carrying in a box of books, Mrs. Ellison from next door approached. Pearl necklace, pressed slacks, a thin smile that reeked of pity. "Oh, Wendy, I was so sorry to hear about your parents. I had no idea you were back. I bought the house," I said flatly. She blinked. "Oh, I thought, well, I assumed Jessica or Brian." "Nope. They tried." That shut her up. She offered a casserole. I declined. Politely, of course. No need to be difficult. I could feel the neighborhood whispering. The black sheep had returned. Not just returned. She'd taken the throne. Jessica texted me a week later. Short and sweet. "Can we talk?" I ignored it. 2 days later, she showed up at my door. I let her in, out of curiosity, like letting a snake into your garden just to see where it slithers. She walked in like she owned the place. Still had that tight-lipped smile. Still wore perfume that smelled like powdered roses and control issues. "You've made changes," she said, eyeing the kitchen like it offended her personally. "I live here," I replied. "Not decorating, for ghosts." She sat on the edge of the couch like it might bite her. "Look, Wendy, I know things got tense toward the end." "Tense? You mean when you all cut me out like I was a misbehaving house pet?" She flinched. "That wasn't me. That was Mom and Dad." "You stood there and let it happen." She crossed her legs, all elegance and avoidance. "They thought you didn't want anything to do with the family. No, they knew I didn't want anything to do with hypocrisy and fake smiles. But I wanted my parents to love me, despite everything." Silence. Then, soft as syrup, she said, "We were under a lot of pressure. You were always complicated." There, it was again. That word. Complicated. The cousin of difficult. I leaned forward. "You know what's really complicated, Jess? Explaining to people why I had to buy my parents' house at an auction. Explaining why I wasn't even told they died." Her eyes glistened. But I didn't trust those tears. Not anymore. "I came here," she said, standing, "because Brian and I are struggling. We have kids, expenses. This house meant a lot to all of us. And you think what? I'm just going to hand you the deed out of sisterly love?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned toward the door. Before she left, she glanced over her shoulder. "You don't belong here, Wendy," I smiled. "Neither did you." She slammed the door. I stood there for a long time after she left. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was something colder. Something clearer. This wasn't about a house. It was about reclaiming space. I started organizing a little get-together, not a party, a viewing. I invited some of the neighbors, some of my own friends, even a couple of local real estate agents. I wanted them to see the transformation. I gave a little speech in the foyer, wine glass in hand. This house was built on appearances, I told them. It was polished, controlled, curated to be perfect. But underneath it all, rot. This home wasn't loving. It was a performance. And now, it's real. For the first time ever, it actually feels alive. Applause. Genuine, if a bit confused. I didn't care. That night I stood on the back porch sipping wine, barefoot. The garden lights twinkled. My mother would have called it tacky. My father would have ignored it entirely. I felt peace, until I heard a rustle in the bushes. Then a whisper. I froze. Peered into the dark. Nothing. Just wind. Still I went inside, locked the doors. Then I found the envelope. It was on the kitchen island. My brand new kitchen island. I hadn't seen it an hour ago. One word written on it. Difficult. Inside, a photograph. Me. At the auction. Someone had taken a picture of me from behind. Just as I raised my hand to place the winning bid. No name, no note, just the word. Difficult. The envelope with the photo sat on my kitchen counter like a loaded gun. Stared at it for hours. No note, no return address. Just that single word, scribbled in sharp, angular letters. Difficult. It wasn't the word that bothered me. I'd worn it like armor for years. What rattled me was the intent behind it. Someone had followed me. Snapped a photo of me at the auction. Got close enough to leave it in my kitchen. Someone wanted me to feel watched, unsettled. They underestimated how familiar I was with that feeling. Growing up in this house, I was always being watched. Not with love, not with care, but with judgment. Disapproval, a constant ticking metronome of expectations I could never meet. If anything, the envelope felt nostalgic. Still, I installed cameras the next day. Front porch, back gate, even the hallway, and I started digging. My first suspect. Brian. After all, he had the most to lose. The man had already leveraged his part of the inheritance into oblivion. Seeing me take the house was probably the final blow to his ego and credit score. I drove out to his place under the guise of returning one of Dad's old photo albums. A peace offering. His house was a mess. Literal pizza boxes in the living room. Kids running wild. His wife barely looked up when I walked in. Brian opened the door wearing sweatpants and a face that screamed midlife crisis. He accepted the album with a grunt and gestured for me to sit. "So," he said after a long silence, "you planning to sell the house?" There it was, the opening line. "No," I said, sipping the coffee his wife handed me without making eye contact. "I'm planning to live there. Long term." He looked deflated, then annoyed. "You know Mom and Dad would have wanted it to stay in the family." "I am family, Brian." He had no comeback. "By the way," I added casually, "did you happen to stop by the house recently?" He blinked. "Why would I?" I shrugged. Someone left a little message, made me wonder. His face went still. Guilty? Hard to tell. He always looked mildly confused. I left shortly after, with no real evidence, but my gut said no. Brian wasn't clever enough, and certainly not quiet enough to sneak in. Next on the list? Jessica. I found her the same way she found me, by surprise. She showed up at the house again 2 days later. This time she knocked. Polite. Predictable. I invited her in. She brought a bottle of wine. Cheap store-brand stuff with a label that tried too hard. "I wanted to clear the air," she said, sitting like she was still afraid the furniture might. "Bite," I played along. "You're not scared of the difficult ghost haunting the halls?" I asked with a smile. She froze. "What?" I let it linger. "Oh, nothing," I said, pouring the wine. "Just a joke." We chatted. She made a few backhanded compliments about the decor. I returned the favor by complimenting her shoes. Knockoffs, clearly. Then I steered the conversation. "You always knew they were planning to cut me out, didn't you?" She hesitated. I suspected, but I didn't agree with it. "Funny. You didn't say anything." She looked wounded. "It wasn't my place." "It never was, right?" She didn't answer. And I didn't press, because the truth was already sitting between us like a third guest on the couch. I waited until she left before checking the footage. She hadn't done anything. No strange behavior. No sleight of hand. Which meant she wasn't my ghost. And then I realized I'd missed someone. Someone who always hovered at the edges. Never made noise, never raised suspicions. Mrs. Ellison, next-door neighbor, casserole carrier, the suburban spy. She'd lived there for over 30 years. She knew every movement, every whisper, every fight that spilled into the driveway. She was the one who didn't know I was back. The one who offered condolences like poison in a crystal bowl. So I paid her a visit. She opened the door like she'd been expecting me. "Wendy," she said, smiling with those thin, bloodless lips. "How nice to see you again." "I figured it was time I returned the favor," I said. She led me in, offered tea, and sat across from me like we were about to play chess. "Do you know what I remember about you?" she asked, sipping slowly. "You used to sit out on the curb when your parents were fighting. You always looked like you were waiting for someone to take you away." I didn't respond. "I thought you'd run far, far away," she added. "But instead you came back." I leaned in. "Did you follow me?" She didn't flinch. "I watched you grow up. You think I wanted to see the house go to strangers?" "It didn't. It went to me." She smiled. "Exactly. And just like that, I understood." Mrs. Ellison didn't send that envelope out of hatred. She sent it as a challenge, to see if I'd crack, to see if I'd run, again. I stood to leave. As I reached the door, she said, "The house isn't the same without your mother." "No," I said. "Now it actually feels like home." Back at the house, I knew what I had to do. Not sell it, not gut it, claim it. So I threw a final party, an open house of sorts. But this time, I invited everyone. Old neighbors, old teachers, former classmates, even the lawyer who executed the will. The invitation said one thing: come see what difficult really looks like. I gave them a tour, showed them the room where I cried myself to sleep as a kid, the wall, where my father once punched a hole during Christmas, the closet where my mother used to hide my report cards to keep up appearances. And then I took them to the backyard. A bonfire pit I had built last week, small, perfect, surrounded by Adirondack, chairs and fairy lights. I held up a box. Inside were copies of the will. Letters I'd written as a child that were never answered, school awards they'd thrown away, all of it. I tossed it into the fire, watched it burn. The crowd was silent. Then I raised my glass. To the difficult ones, the truth-tellers, the question-askers, the black sheep, I smiled. And to anyone who's ever been left out, may you come back louder, bolder, and with keys in hand. Applause followed. Not everyone clapped, but I didn't care. I had my house. I had my voice. And now, I had my story. Some people inherit legacies. I burned mine and built something better in its place. They tried to write me out, but I made sure the last word was mine.